There are other temporal references too in the Bible, just as there are in our own experience. As many of you know, our second son Gabriel just last summer made us grandparents for the first time. And Gabriel has always been fun to father, just like the other 6 kids, the other 5 kids. But there was a statement I remember hearing Gabriel make to some people who were on a pilgrimage like this. When he was much younger, he told these people, "I was born on the very day my parents got married." And we were like, wait a minute, a word of explanation. He was born on the day we got married on our 5th anniversary. That little extra tidbit was really essential for a proper understanding. I would like to focus upon another theme that has to do with God visiting us in time. And that is the references we hear frequently to the day and the hour, and how Christ comes to us. And we're familiar with this because it pervades the Gospels. Especially in the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus speaks about how he doesn't know the day and the hour in terms of his own human nature as the Son of Man. How only the Father knows the day and the hour, and he warns people to be ready because what? He'll come like a thief in the night. Now that's not an endorsement on theft, of course, but it is a warning, one that I had to learn the hard way to take seriously. I was home one night, all alone, and Kimberly and the kids were, I think, down in the Carolinas, and I woke up, you know, as nature sometimes beckons you to do, around 3 a.m., and as I came back from the bathroom, I noticed that the light was on downstairs, and I remember purposefully turning out all the lights before I went to bed. So I'm thinking, everybody's not only out of town, but out of state, and so I opened the door and I called out, "Is somebody down there?" Well, nobody responded, but the footsteps that began scampering told me that somebody was down there. And so I said, "I'm calling the police." And I closed the door. And I went over to the telephone next to my bed and on my nightstand, and I called the Steubenville police. And they said, "Stay right there." And I said, "I have no intentions of going down there and combating whoever they might be." And you know, so we had to bide the time while Steubenville's finest showed up. And they showed up within about 3 minutes. They were very good about that. And before they did, you know, the question was, "Well, are you missing anything?" Well, I said, I haven't even left my bedroom, you know. But now that you mention it, yeah. My wallet and my cell phone that were right here on my nightstand, 6 inches from where I slept, are gone. Gulp. And I'm thinking, now, how could that happen? You know, unless that fella had actually walked into my room and fearlessly walked right over to me and took it. So within about 5 minutes, the cops worked through the house and came upstairs, and I was explaining to them what I was missing. And we investigated. The guy got away. He was caught about a month later because he did so many of these other break-ins. But that was one of those experiences where I read the gospel references to the day and the hour and a thief in the night with a whole new sense of personal engagement. You know? But I would like to focus upon another passage that we heard today, and that's found in John chapter 2 with the first sign of Jesus, with the marriage at Cana in Galilee. And you all know the story, and I think you probably even know the temporal reference. Time is always just saturated with eternity, because that's how God meets us. He who is eternal and infinite has to come down and accommodate himself to us because we are finite and temporal. John seems to know that this pattern is nothing new with Jesus coming. It's something that goes all the way back to creation. And again, this is something I mentioned to a few of you. I think, in fact, it was on the bus. In John's Gospel, we have the Christ event narrated in the opening chapter in a way that's very different than what you find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Synoptic Gospel's preferential option is for the infancy narratives. You know, Bethlehem, Nazareth, the Magi, the shepherds, that sort of thing. But John's very different. Instead of starting with the birth of Jesus' humanity, he starts with the eternality of Jesus' divinity. With what statement? The opening verse. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was, yeah, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So what do you immediately hear with those opening words, in the beginning? Genesis 1:1. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate, but it's not just deliberate, it's significant. Because what we're going to see John do is present the incarnational debut of Jesus as the fulfillment of the plan of God that goes all the way back to the beginning, to creation itself. That Jesus wasn't sort of like waiting in the wings or, sitting in his dressing room for, centuries or millennia until finally, the cue came and he stepped out on center stage and became man. No, he was the agent. He was the power. He was the person through whom God works. So we can appropriate the act of creation to not just God the Father, but Christ the Son. And these themes that remind us of creation are found throughout the next several verses. You've seen this before, I suspect. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. There, it's explicit. I am talking about Genesis. And he goes on in the next verse, for in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness hasn't overcome it. In the beginning, what did God create? He said, let there be light. And then he separates the light from the dark. And the light is the day that overcomes the darkness. And so here again, we can see how the purpose of Christ's coming is to complete the plan of God that goes all the way back to creation in the beginning. There are other themes too, such as water with John's baptism. But you know how Genesis 1 and 2 work out, how they develop the next day, and God is doing something new each of these 6 days until the climax. When day 6 comes, in Genesis 1:26 we read how God said, let us make man in our image and after our own likeness. And he made man, male and female. The summary description of that is in Genesis 1, but the more specific elaboration on how he went about that is what you find in Genesis 2. Because he made man, male and female, but he made man male first, on day 6, presumably. And then after the deep sleep, what happens? He awakens, and what does he see? Woman, Eve, Isha, he says. So he awakens and sees what God has done with the rib that he took to construct the woman, and he's just in awe of her beauty and of God's wondrous creation. You save the best to last, don't they? That's what the Lord did.